Hello, comrades. Welcome to the Soviet journey. At this station of our journey, we will discuss veterinary medicine in the Soviet Union. I wanted to examine what kind of process took place in the Soviet Union regarding animal health and what progress veterinary medicine and the veterinary medicine industry had made. If you are interested, here is the world of veterinary medicine in the Soviet Union. The developments in the Soviet Union process of building socialism are very comprehensive. The Soviet society, which made breakthroughs in many areas such as science, culture, economy, society, and education, gave great importance to veterinarians responsible for animal health. Since animal health is directly related to human health, veterinarians had an extremely important role in the health of Soviet people. As it is known, a large proportion of the microorganisms that cause diseases in humans first infect animals and then pass on to humans. Veterinarians responsible for the prevention of these diseases carried out great work to increase the welfare of Soviet people. Many diseases that threaten human health. It can be transmitted to humans through animal products such as meat, milk, and eggs, and it can also be caused by the environment where humans and animals live together. Veterinarians, who are extremely important for human health, played critical roles in many areas in the Soviet Union. Let's take a look at this historical information on veterinary medicine, which was of great importance in Soviet society. If we start with numbers, we can better demonstrate the achievements of the new Soviet administration. While there were 1,636 veterinary stations in the Russian Empire in 1916, before the October Revolution, this number increased to 2,762 in 1926 during the 10-year period. On the other hand, the number of animals in the country in 1925 was brought to its pre-World War I level in 1914. Even these two data show us that the new Soviet administration carried out important work in the fields of animal husbandry, animal health, and veterinary medicine. Animals and animal products have always been of critical importance in the Soviet Union for the purpose of meeting human welfare and food needs, which is the main subject of socialism. Since the rapid increase in the number of animals and the creation of large animal farms also led to the spread of various infectious diseases, the number of veterinarians trained and assigned has also increased in parallel. In this context, the Board of People's Commissars of the Russian Soviet issued a decree on veterinary affairs in 1926 and instructed the establishment and development of higher education institutions in veterinary medicine. Thus, many facilities and diagnostic laboratories began to be established from the early Soviet times, and technical tools such as vaccines and serum began to be produced in these facilities. The first applications of artificial insemination in farm animals took place in the Soviet Union. Applications were made on cattle in 1927 and on sheep in 1928, and great progress was made in this field. Soviet scientist Ilya Ivanovich Ivanov went down in history as the first person to initiate the practical use of artificial insemination in all farm animals, especially horses, and achieved great success. In 1930 and 1931, many agricultural institutes were opened in Orenburg, Kirov, Turkmenistan, and Azerbaijan. In 1932, these departments were also opened in Tbilisi and Makhachkala. In the following period, veterinary stations were established in many regions, such as Kharkiv, Leningrad, Omsk, Voronezh, and Kursk, and studies were carried out on animal health and therefore human health. At the beginning of the collectivization period between 1929 and 1935, farms and working staff were generally low level. Animals were brought together in large groups, and diseases often occurred due to lack of feed. During this period, many diseases such as cholebacillosis, salmonella, tuberculosis, and brucellosis were seen massively. The Labour and Defence Council adopted a resolution in 1931 on the reorganisation of veterinary affairs. In the same year, the Central Control Commission, the Workers' People's Commissariat, and the Pest and Inspection Board made various decisions regarding the state of veterinary affairs and the fight against existing animal diseases. In 1933, Savnarkom issued a decree on the organisation of veterinary affairs. Subsequently, the improvement of veterinary affairs was intensively discussed at the plenary meeting of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union in July 1934. These meetings focused on issues such as general veterinary services, improving the skills and areas of activity of veterinarians, providing the necessary medicines and equipment, and combating animal diseases in order to prevent diseases. In this context, precautions were taken against many diseases that were frequently seen in animals at that time, such as anthrax, rabies, blackleg, foot and nail diseases, oral diseases, septicemia, and sheep pox. Despite all this, all research organizations continued their research on disease prevention. Many congresses and conferences were organized, and the Soviet scientific world was mobilized. At that time, the main topics of these meetings were the prevention of animal diseases that could not be treated and the development of Soviet veterinary personnel. The first of these congresses took place in Moscow in September 1930 and the second in January 1932. Since 1934, veterinary clinics were established to control veterinary drugs. Epidemic bovine pneumonia has been largely eliminated. The incidence of anthrax, equine encephalomyelitis, and sheep pox in the Soviet Union has decreased significantly. In 1936, the Soviet government issued a new veterinary regulation. In the regulation covering the changes in agriculture, measures to ensure the protection of animal health and public health against epidemic diseases were within the scope of this regulation. In this context, many vaccines and serums were produced. By the early 1940s, there were more than 600 vaccine and serum-producing laboratories, more than 20 biological factories, and 25 veterinary faculties and institutes with approximately 10,000 students in the country. Professor of Veterinary Medicine Konstantin Ivanovich Scriabin, who carried out important work in Soviet science, made numerous discoveries in preventing the spread of worm and helminth infections in the USSR. He was given the Stalin Prize in 1941. The same award was given to Professor Sergei Nikolaevich Vyshelsky, who carried out great studies on infectious animal diseases in 1940. Today, Vyshelsky's name is found in many institutes and laboratories in Belarus and Russia. In the period after the Nazis' attempt to invade the Soviets, there was a decline in veterinary medicine. Development plans could not be realized and veterinary drug production could not be carried out. During this period, animals were evacuated to the eastern parts of the country, especially to prevent epidemics. During the war, animal shelters and farms were destroyed, and approximately 17 million horses, 20 million cattle, and 27 million pigs living in the Soviet Union were killed by the Nazis. These animals, which had food value, were deliberately killed because the Nazis planned to starve millions of Soviet civilians as a military plan. This brutal plan of the Nazis is today called the Hunger Plan. I gave various information on this subject in another video. You can watch it from the video link I placed at the top right. Although there were regressions in many areas during the war, various scientific discoveries were made in laboratories in regions not directly affected by the war. In this context, tissue therapy and treatment methods against foot diseases were developed. Also during this period, a new anthrax vaccine and sheeppox vaccine were developed. During the post-war recovery period in many areas, studies in the field of veterinary medicine accelerated, as in other fields. In 1949, a 3-year plan for the development of productive animals on collective farms was adopted. In September 1953, the Council of Ministers of the Soviet Union adopted a decree to take measures for the development of animal husbandry. During this period, the development of veterinary sciences was carried out on a wide scale. Many new scientific schools were established. In these institutions, where practical applications were also carried out, various trainings were given with books prepared by previously experienced instructors. Many new drugs have been discovered in the field of veterinary medicine. During the 1950s and 1960 seconds, which encompassed the period known as the space race, the Soviet Union used many dogs in suborbital and orbital space flights to determine whether human flights would be possible. Therefore, veterinary medical studies on dogs have accelerated. Soviet scientists determined that dogs were the most suitable animals for the tasks because they found that they were accustomed to long periods of inactivity. As part of their training, the dogs were kept in small boxes for 15-20 days. Dogs living on the streets, rather than dogs accustomed to living in homes, were chosen for the flight mission because it was decided that they could withstand the extreme conditions of space flights better. Due to the device used to collect feces works only on females, only female dogs were used in the flights. Dzik and Tsgan were the first dogs to go into space in 1951. Laika became the first dog to go into orbit in 1957. The name Laika is still known with respect today. Studies were carried out between the Soviet Union and Turkey on artificial insemination methods developed by the Soviets in the 1920s, and thus joint studies in the field of veterinary medicine began between the two countries. In 1925, Turkey's Minister of Agriculture, Mehmet Sabri Toprak, made an official visit to the Soviet Union. During this visit, farms in the Soviet Union were visited and it was demonstrated how artificial insemination was applied to horses. Minister Toprak, who saw this application, which was the first of its kind in the world at the time, and believed that this technique could be used in animal studies in Turkey, requested that the Soviets send an expert on this subject to Turkey. Thereupon, Mikhailov, one of the assistants of Ilya Ivanovich Ivanov, who is considered the founder of artificial insemination in the Soviets, came to Turkey in 1926 and organized a horse artificial insemination course for veterinarians at the Karakabi stud farm. This course was later held at Iftela stud farm, and thus the artificial insemination method in horses was spread to other state animal husbandry institutions in Turkey. Later, veterinarians such as Ahmet Fahri Araz, Tahsin Muzlu and Smail Haq were sent to the Soviet Union for training, especially to be trained in artificial insemination and infertility in sheep and cattle. Agreements were signed between Turkey and the Soviet Union for the benefit of the people on both sides from the pastures on both sides of the border. The first agreement was put into effect in 1929, and then the agreement on measures to be taken against the spread of infectious animal diseases on the Georgian border was passed by the Turkish Parliament on February 23, 1929, and entered into force with the number 1399. After this agreement, he worked in Moscow between 10 July and September 10, 1930. A meeting was held with the participation of delegates from Turkey, the Soviet Union and Iran, and a consensus was reached on common measures to be taken against animal diseases. In the following period, too, the Soviets and Turkey, whose relations deteriorated during World War II and the subsequent Cold War, never again carried out such joint efforts as in this period. Yes, comrades, in this video, I wanted to compile for you what developments took place in the field of veterinary medicine in the Soviet Union. I'm sure there are veterinarians among those who watch the video. I hope this topic meets your needs. I make many videos on Soviet science. You can access the relevant videos from the link at the top right. As you know, Soviet history has influenced the entire world history, and therefore the areas it covers are extremely wide. Therefore, it is not only about Soviet science. I publish such documentaries in many fields, such as history, politics, or education. You can also access all our documentaries from the link on the top right. See you again in other videos. Please don't forget to follow and subscribe to our Soviet Journey channel, friends. If you have any contributions on the subject, please write them in the comments below and let's discuss them together.